In Nairobi, the vibrant and busy streets always burst with excitement, but within the church halls of God's Glory Ministry, a different kind of energy fills the air. Pastor Esther, a charismatic woman in her early 40s, had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the most influential figures in the city. She had the gift of captivating her congregation with words of hope and promises of miracles. Her church, known for its vibrant services and powerful healings, had drawn crowds of people from all over Nairobi, desperate for a breakthrough. Every Sunday, Pastor Esther stood tall on the pulpit, her deep voice resonating through the walls as she preached about the power of faith and healing. Many claimed to have been healed from incurable diseases, and her miracles seemed to happen regularly. People wept with joy, feeling reborn. The church grew bigger with every passing week, and Pastor Esther basked in the adoration of her followers. Among the crowd was Grace, a young woman in her early 20s who had recently lost both her parents in a tragic car accident. Overcome with grief and financial struggles, Grace was searching for hope, something to cling on to. Her friend Sarah encouraged her to attend God's Glory Ministry, saying that Pastor Esther had helped many people like her. The first time Grace walked into the church, she was mesmerized. Pastor Esther stood before the congregation, confidently proclaiming that the Lord would heal all sicknesses and answer all prayers. Grace, like many others, felt a warmth inside her, a sense that perhaps this was the answer she had been longing for. She watched as a woman in the crowd claimed to be healed of a long-standing illness, and the entire crowd erupted into applause. The scene was overwhelming, and for a moment, Grace believed she had found the miracle she needed. But as Grace continued to attend the services, a nagging doubt began to creep into her heart. One evening, after witnessing another dramatic healing, she noticed something unusual. The woman who had claimed to be healed didn't look as joyful or relieved as expected. Instead, she seemed unnervingly calm, almost like she was in a trance. This unsettled Grace, who had begun to question the true source of these miraculous events. After the service, Grace confided in Pastor Wambua, a humble older pastor she knew from a smaller church in Nairobi. Pastor Wambua had always been a voice of caution when it came to Pastor Esther's ministry. He told Grace, although miracles were part of God's plan, not all healings were truly divine. Pastor Wambua had heard rumors that Pastor Esther might be using dark powers to perform her miracles. He urged Grace to be careful and not blindly follow anyone without asking the right questions. Feeling conflicted, Grace began to notice more oddities during Pastor Esther's service. The healings were becoming more frequent, but they lacked the genuine transformation she had once expected. Pastor Esther's energy seemed to grow darker with each passing service. It was not long before Grace's curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to follow Pastor Esther after service to find out the truth. That night, Grace quietly followed the pastor to a secluded part of the church complex. Peeking through a slightly ajar door, Grace saw Pastor Esther performing a strange ritual. Candles burnt brightly in the dim room, and symbols that looked nothing like anything from the Bible were drawn on the floor. Pastor Esther was chanting in a language that felt unnatural. In that moment, the unsettling truth dawned on Grace. Pastor Esther was using occult practices to channel her powers. The revelation shook Grace to her core. Pastor Esther, once a beacon of hope, now seemed like a false prophet, manipulating people's faith for her own gain. As Pastor Esther's eyes glowed with an eerie light, Grace backed away from the door, her heart racing. The next day, Grace went to see Pastor Wambua. He listened intently as Grace shared what she had seen. Pastor Wambua sighed deeply and told her that many people had been deceived by false prophets throughout history. He reminded Grace that true miracles come from a relationship with God, not from rituals that sought to summon power from dark sources. Pastor Wambua encouraged Grace to expose the truth and help others before more people were led astray. But Grace was torn. Pastor Esther's church was growing rapidly, and the thought of standing against such a powerful woman filled her with fear. If she spoke out, she risked losing her place in the church, and her friends, who were all loyal to Pastor Esther, might turn against her. She wrestled with her conscience for days, praying for clarity. One evening, she felt a deep peace in her heart, a sense that she needed to act before more people fell into Pastor Esther's web of lies. With newfound courage, Grace decided to confront Pastor Esther. She waited for a moment when the two were alone and accused Pastor Esther of using dark powers to perform her miracles. The pastor responded with laughter, dismissing Grace's accusations. She coldly reminded Grace that no one would believe her. "You'll never make it out alive if you try to expose me," Pastor Esther threatened, her voice dripping with venom. Grace knew that she couldn't back down. She quietly began to share her story with a few of the congregation members, warning them about the dark forces at play. As word spread, some people left the church, but Pastor Esther's power over her followers was strong. She performed another miracle that stunned the crowd, but the atmosphere had shifted. A sense of unease began to settle over the church. Soon, cracks in the foundation of God's Glory Ministry began to show. The church, once bustling with people, started to empty out. Grace continued to speak with those who would listen, including members of Pastor Esther's inner circle. Slowly but surely, more people began to question the legitimacy of the miracles and left the church. In a final attempt to hold on to her empire, Pastor Esther tried one last desperate measure. She performed an extravagant healing ceremony, hoping to sway the remaining members of her congregation. But this time, the power behind her miracles was gone. The healings were unconvincing, and the crowd, once mesmerized by her presence, began to disperse. The once thriving ministry was now abandoned. Pastor Esther, standing on the pulpit, looked out over the empty seats. Her voice trembled as she tried to call people back, but the magic of her illusions had faded. She had built an empire on lies, and now it was gone. Grace, on the other hand, found peace. She had faced her fears and exposed the truth. As she walked into Pastor Wambua's modest church, she felt a deep sense of relief. Pastor Wambua welcomed her with a gentle smile, and together they prayed, knowing that true miracles come from faith, love, and truth. Pastor Wambua's congregation slowly grew as people who had once been deceived by Pastor Esther's false promises of healing now sought the light of real faith. Grace knew she had done the right thing, and though it had been difficult, she had helped others find their way back to God's true power.